Hi everyone and welcome to another reading vlog. It is currently February and I have no idea when you're actually going to be seeing this vlog. I think it's probably going to be in around 4 or 5 months time because it's going to take me a while to get through these books, but as you've probably guessed from the title, in this reading vlog I'm going to be reading the entire first Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, and this video is going to be spoiler free, so don't worry if you haven't read this series. I'm not going to spoil anything or go into, spoilers. I'm reading this series for the Catch Up Book Club, which is hosted by Becca from Becca and the Books. I'll leave all the details in the description just in case you want to find out more, but I'm currently reading The Blade Itself, which is book 1 in the trilogy. I'm around 30% of the way through this, and I feel like I know enough now to be able to give a proper synopsis, kind of. I still feel like I haven't quite grasped what the plot is for this book, but a lot of people warn me that this is very character driven. So there's 3 main characters that we're following. The first is a guy called Logan Ninefingers, who's this barbarian warrior, and at the very start of the book he's separated from his friends, I guess, if you could call them friends, but he ends up stranded in the wilderness, and there's some stuff in his past which I'm not going to go into, but yeah, basically his perspective has been learning about his past so far, and there's also a wizard. The second perspective that we're following is Glockter, and he is an inquisitor, so he works for this organisation that is linked to the government or the empire, and his job is to interrogate people who might be traitors to this government, and he's basically a torturer. The third perspective is this guy called Jezel, and I always forget his name, but he's a captain within the army of this empire. He's quite spoiled and he doesn't really want to be a soldier. He would much rather be off gambling and gallivanting and drinking and all of that stuff. This is also my favourite type of world building because Joe Abercrombie has basically dropped us into this world with these characters, and there's no info dumping. Like, there's been explanations around stuff, but it's done through dialogue and through conversations between the characters, and I prefer that. I would much rather learn things gradually rather than have to read a load of exposition, and even though I have been a little bit confused at times, I think I'm meant to have been confused. I feel like Joe Abercrombie is gradually painting this picture, and more's going to be revealed the further that I get into the book. The only thing I'm struggling with a little bit is that there's no map in this book, and because it's quite a political plot, I feel like there's a war brewing, and so characters have referred to places within this world and they've said, oh, it's in the north, or oh, it's across the sea, and I'm struggling to picture where these places are in comparison to where the characters are. So that's the only thing that I am struggling with a little bit. It's not like a big deal, and yeah, I think there is a map online that I can look up if I am really struggling, but I am really excited to carry on reading this. It's been quite slow, but it's not like painfully slow. It's more that we're getting to know the characters and we're being introduced to the world, so I think this is going to be mostly a setup book, and then the action is really going to get going in the next 2 books. I don't know why, but I thought the writing in this was going to be super dense and difficult to get through, but it's not at all. I am over halfway through now, and I can understand why people describe this as slow. I don't think it's the writing that's slow. I think it's more that not much is really happening, and it is very character driven, but now that I know the characters, I am reading it quite quickly because it's not like I'm having to really concentrate. Like, you know how sometimes you'll pick up a book that has very purple prose and you do have to read every single word? That's not my kind of thing. I don't like books like that, but I'm liking the writing in this so far. I can understand why people describe this as grimdark, because it's grim and it's dark. However, I feel like maybe I just haven't got to that point yet, but I'm sure I've read books that are just as gruesome as this is. Maybe I've just been desensitized to content like that, but it's not like I'm reading this and thinking, wow, this is excessive and I'm really struggling to stomach it. I mean, it's not like it's wonderful to read about. I did actually want to mention content warnings for torture scenes, and also there's been some very graphic descriptions of injury detail, so yeah, I did want to mention that. But yeah, so far this is ticking a lot of boxes for me in terms of what I personally enjoy reading about in fantasy, because it's political and there's that intrigue where I wouldn't say there's a mystery, but I also think that this book is going to be unpredictable and it's going to surprise me, and there's going to be some twists and turns that I don't see come in, which is something that I really, really love. The only thing that's missing for me so far is a magic system. So I am someone who loves a hard magic system where there's lots of rules and restrictions and where it's very logic based. And the magic in this world, I feel like we haven't actually got to see much of the magic actually so far, but it does feel more random and like anything goes. But I might be wrong. There has been hints actually that there's a different type of magic that, yeah, we haven't learned about yet. So maybe that's to come. But so far, enjoying this. I think if I was to make a prediction now, I'd say it's going to be a 4 stars, but it depends on how it ends. If the ending surprises me, then it could be a 5 stars. So I finished reading The Blade itself, and I don't know yet what I'm going to rate this. I think it might be a 5 stars. I sound really confused. It's definitely a 4 stars, possibly higher. However, I don't think there was enough content in this for me to make that decision now. This felt like a very long prologue, and as I was reading it, I could feel the potential for this series to be 5 stars overall. This happens sometimes with series where I'll read the first book and I can see the potential for me to love every single book after that, and I did really enjoy this. It's just I don't feel like I can give it 5 stars until I know what direction the series is going to go in, because I think that's going to influence how I feel about this book. You know, like this was a good setup book introducing the characters and the world, but there wasn't really much plot. I also wanted to clarify something that I said earlier about how grim and dark this is, and I think what I was trying to say is that horrible things happen within this book. However, the tone is a lot lighter than other books that I've read that also have horrible things happening in them. Like there are a lot of other series that I've read that are very melancholy in the tone, and you can tell that the author is trying to make you feel sad or potentially even cry, whereas I don't feel like that's what Joe Abercrombie is going for. I think not that he's trying to make you laugh, but there's moments of humour throughout this that means it doesn't feel like super down. So yeah, I am really excited to carry on with this series. I will say that if you're the kind of reader who likes to try the first book in a series before deciding whether to continue, then just go into this knowing that this doesn't feel like a completed story. Like this whole book is basically world building and character building. So yeah, that's why I'm really struggling to give an overall rating, because I don't think I can judge this series based purely on the first book, even though I did really enjoy this.
Saturday wanted to call, but I never know what to say. Taking pictures with my phone, distracting me from my brain. It's 2 p.m. You said just friends.
Hello. It feels very surreal to be filming another update for this vlog, because it's been around 6 weeks since I finished The Blade itself, but I have now made a start on Before They Are Hanged, which is the second book in this series, and so far I'm liking it, but I'm also struggling to get back into it. I'm around 70 pages in, or 77 pages in, and even though I still like the characters and I'm still intrigued by what's going on, I don't really understand what's going on. This pretty much picks up where the last book left off. So if you're like me and you don't have the best memory, if you're thinking about picking up this series, then I'd recommend reading the books quite close together, because there's a lot that I think I've forgotten even in just 6 weeks. You know how sometimes you'll pick up the second book in a series and the first part will be kind of recapping the previous book? There's none of that with this series. So yeah, I have struggled with that a little bit. Without going into spoilers, there are 3 main threads to the plot in this book. So there's characters in 3 main parts of the world. One storyline is more political and there's also a bit of a mystery going on, and then another seems like it's going to be a travelling / quest type situation, and then the final thread is battle focused. So I like that there's a bit of variety and I love the characters. I think that that's probably my favourite thing about the series so far, is I really like the way that Joe Abercrombie writes characters. I think someone mentioned in the last live show, but there's quite a few similarities between this series and also Game of Thrones, which I think makes sense because they came out around at the same time. This came out a little bit later, but I guess it makes sense because obviously Game of Thrones was super popular, so it makes sense that publishers were publishing books that were similar because it was like a trend at the time. As I mentioned, I have a terrible memory, and so I'm still struggling with the fact that there's no map for this series. I have now found one online though. They were talking about it on the live show, and apparently someone, not Joe Abercrombie, but a fan, actually drew a map which you can find online. So I'm using that kind of. I just don't understand why there was no map for this series. Actually, I do understand, because I looked on the author's website and he was talking about how his thinking was that if he didn't include a map, then people would be more focused on the characters and experiencing what was happening as the characters were experiencing, which I think I kind of understand, but also I don't have a good memory, and so I rely quite heavily on maps to remind me of place names. Like sometimes a character will be reintroduced in a series and I'll be thinking, I know that character, where did we meet that character, where are they from? And so I'll go back to the map and it'll remind me, but obviously I can't do that with this series and I hate it. But yeah, otherwise I'm still intrigued to see where this goes. I'm hoping we get more plot in this. Like, there is very clearly a plot in this series, it's just that it's on the edge of my consciousness and I can't quite grasp it. But usually I like that. I like it when an author doesn't over-explain stuff. And yeah, Joe Abercrombie doesn't over-explain stuff. I have been so confused while reading this series, but I'm glad that I'm finally getting to book 2. I'll let you know once I have more thoughts on this. I'm taking it slow because this is quite a slow-paced book, but I'm hoping to read around 50 pages per day. Don't know how often I'm gonna update you, but I'm hoping to finish this before the end of March, because yeah, it's currently March. By the time you watch this vlog, it's probably gonna be summer. We'll let you know once I have more reading updates. Apologies if I sound really awful in this update. I've not been feeling very well over the last few days, but I wanted to do a very quick update for this vlog because I'm now around 200 pages into Before They Are Hanged and I am liking this so far. I'm glad that in this last section we learn a little more about the history of the world, because if I was to describe my feelings on this book with one word, it would be frustrating. There are characters in this book who are doing stuff or going places, and I don't know why. I mean, the characters don't know why either. I feel like the way that this series has been written is that Joe Abercrombie wants the reader to experience and learn stuff as the characters are experiencing and learning stuff. So I feel like he's achieving what he wants to achieve, but as the reader, I am frustrated because I'm just the kind of person who likes to know what's going on. I like to understand characters' motivations, and I'm sure that eventually everything's going to click into place. I have faith that I'm going to really love this series once I get to the end of it, because I'm obviously going to know a lot more than I do now. I mean, there was one point earlier where it was so frustrating because one of the characters was thinking or saying that they should really ask another character why they were going to this place, and I was thinking to myself, yes, you should ask them why you're going there, because I want to know. Yeah, it's really frustrating, but generally I am liking the characters. I feel like Joe Abercrombie's strength is in his character writing. The characters aren't always likeable and they're not always good people. There's definitely some morally greyness going on, but I do feel like these characters have layers and they feel realistic. The only thing I wanted to mention, and it's becoming more obvious in this book, is that there aren't many female characters in this series, and the one female perspective that we do get is the character that I like the least. I feel like the female characters, in comparison to the male characters, don't have as much depth and they're just kind of there. What is really interesting though is that my thoughts and feelings towards certain characters has changed from the first book into this book. There are characters that I liked in the first book that in this book I don't like as much, and there are characters who I didn't like as much in the first book that I do like in this book, so I like that. I feel like it's keeping me on my toes, even though it's also keeping me in the dark, and especially because I am someone who loves political fantasy and I still don't fully understand the politics of this world. I feel like I have some of the pieces, I just don't have all of the pieces yet, so it can't quite click together in my mind. But yeah, I do have faith that Joe Abercrombie has a plan for this series. I just don't know what it is yet. Hello. I realised I should probably do a very quick update on Before They Are Hanged, because I've only got about 200 pages left of this. I'm on page 373. I am hoping to finish this either today or tomorrow because I'm really enjoying it. I really like the direction this is going in, and I think I've worked out what the plot is actually gonna be, maybe. I think now that I'm further in, I can actually summarise the plot in a very general and vague way, because I know I haven't really done that. I wanted to get a bit further into this series because I wanted to work out what would be a spoiler or not, but basically this series is set in this world where you have this country called the Union, and I think the Union is very loosely based on the British Empire, because at some point in the past they colonised various areas of this world and it's created this political tension. Obviously I'm being very vague because this is a spoiler-free vlog, but alongside that there's also a lot of history to this world concerning magic. Oh, I don't know how to phrase this, but basically you spend a lot of time in this series trying to work out how the past, like the ancient past, ties in to the present day. And yeah, I really like that. There's a lot of mystery and there's a lot of theorising over what's actually going on, which has been a little frustrating at times, but I feel like the characters are really carrying this series. I like how there's a variety of different ages and it's creating these really interesting dynamics. I don't know whether it's because I've recently been watching The Last of Us, so I like seeing older characters interact with younger characters. This isn't really that kind of dynamic. Like, it's not the same dynamic as The Last of Us, but we do have more experienced characters interacting with younger characters who maybe aren't as experienced, and yeah, I'm really liking that dynamic. There's been some really interesting conversations characters, and I like that there's stuff going on under the surface that probably isn't going to make sense until either the end of this book or even the end of the series. I feel like the potential for this world to become really expansive it's good. I really like it. So yeah, I don't know if this is going to be 5 stars or whether it's going to be another very strong 4 stars, but we'll see what I think of the ending. Like I said, I've got 200 pages left and I'm hoping to finish it either today or tomorrow. I've not been very well recently, so if you can hear it in my voice, then that's why, but I'm ready to get stuck into this again. And it's going to be, yeah, interesting to see how this ends, because I do have theories. I think I've worked out something. I think I've worked something out quicker than the characters have worked this thing out. So yeah, we'll see if I'm right on that. So I have finished reading Before They Are Hanged, and I think I'm going to go with a 4-star rating for this, because I didn't like it any less than the first book, but I didn't like it more, and I was hoping that I would enjoy this a lot more than I did, but I still really liked it. I still really like the characters, or I feel the way that I'm meant to feel about the characters, because I feel like there's some characters in this that you're not meant to like, or that you're meant to have complicated feelings about, and I had some very complicated feelings, especially towards the end of this book. I'm really interested in the live show and what other people think of certain things that happen in this. I completely misread a certain situation and I'm laughing about it now, but there was something that happened in this book that gave me the ick and that I didn't like at all, and I'm interested to see if other people feel a similar way or whether it's just me. Yeah, I think that's all I can really say without spoilers. This did also very much feel like the middle book in a series, because there was a little bit of progression, but it mostly felt like characters were being manoeuvred to be in the situation that they needed to be in for the third book. I would quite like to pick up the third book soon. I was planning on waiting a couple of months, but I think I would have found it easier to get into this if I'd read it closer to the first book. Even though I only left it like 6 weeks, I still struggled a little bit with certain characters, because there's quite a lot of side characters in this, and sometimes I struggle to remember who people were, especially because there's no character list or anything like that. We'll let you know once I pick up book 3 though, which is called, is it The Argument of Kings? Last Argument of Kings. I'll let you know once I've made a start on that, and I'm hoping that's finally going to be a 5 stars.
I dreamed I had a million things to hold me over till you call, you call, you call. I've got nobody at all to break my fall.
Let's talk about Last Argument of Kings, because I'm currently around 100 pages into this, not that far, but already I am liking this more than the first 2 books, or I feel like I've got into this quicker than the first 2 books, possibly because I like the characters, or I feel attached to the characters. Some of the characters I don't love, but I'm invested in this story now and I want to know what's going to happen, because at the moment we're balanced on a knife edge and I feel like it could tip either way, and there's this tension which I'm really liking. I will say that there's already been far too many sex scenes for my liking, even in just the first 100 pages. I mean, I get it that Joe Abercrombie is going for awkwardly realistic with the sex scenes in the series, but I just don't enjoy reading them. It was really interesting actually watching the last live show for Before They Are Hanged, because everyone had such different opinions on this series. I swear there was every rating between 1 star and 5 stars. And I can understand why, because I think if you don't feel any kind of attachment to the characters in this series, then you're just not going to enjoy it, because there's not really enough plot to keep you interested. Like, the way that Joe Abercrombie has written this series is that you know as much much about what's going on as the characters know, which I find really frustrating. And so that's why I'm hoping with this book that we get some answers. And I'm also just hoping that the pace picks up a little bit in this final book, because it has been very slow. But yeah, very excited to get back into this series and finish it. I'm not actually going to talk about who my favourite characters are right now. I think I'm going to wait until I've finished this book and then talk about the characters as a whole, because I think that's going to be the easiest way for me to do it without going into spoilers. So I realised I should probably update you with some thoughts on The Last Argument of Kings, because I'm almost halfway through this now. I'm on page 304, so not quite halfway through, but I am really enjoying this so far. This first section, well, the first half, has been faster paced than the first two books. I still wouldn't say that it's fast paced overall, but stuff is finally happening and it feels really satisfying, because I can see the groundwork that Joe Abercrombie has laid in the first two books. Stuff has happened that I didn't expect to happen, and then some stuff has happened that I kind of predicted, but not like in a predictable way. It was more like I had theories, and it turns out that I was kind of along the right lines. The only thing that's confusing me a little bit is that new characters are being introduced, and I can't work out whether I've heard of these characters before or whether they are actually new characters. Like, I know that I haven't met them before, but the way that these characters are being introduced is that a character will think to themselves, oh, this is Bob, and I met him previously during this battle. And I'm pretty sure that all of this happened before the start of the first book, but it just feels a little bit info dumpy, and it's being done in a way where I'm struggling to remember all of these side characters and how they connect to the other characters. But yeah, so far I am really enjoying it overall, and it's finally given me 5-star feelings, which is what I wanted from this series. I'm not sure what kind of ending this is going to have. I don't know whether it's going to have like a satisfying ending or whether it's going to be more open-ended, because I know that there's other books that continue past this series but that follow different characters or different generations. I don't mind if it's not a happy ending, because at the end of the day, this is grimdark and I don't think that that would be realistic. But yeah, I'm gonna read some more of this over the weekend. I don't know if I'm gonna have time to film any updates this weekend, because I've got quite a few plans, which means it's gonna be hard to talk to the camera, but I might update you before I finish this. I might update you once I have finished it, but so far, so good. So I thought I should quickly update you on Last Argument of Kings, because I'm only around 200 pages from the end now, and I'm going to try and finish this today because I'm not working today. I climbed a mountain yesterday, so I decided to book today off work because I figured that I wasn't going to want to work today, and I was right. So current me is very appreciative of past me for having that foresight, but I'm going to try and finish this today. I am really liking this. I feel like I've reached the point now where we're reaching the climax of the story, and I'm really appreciating all of the foreshadowing and just some of the characters' interactions. I think have been done really well, and I'm nervous about what's going to happen, especially because there's only 200 pages left. I'm convinced that Joe Abercrombie wrote a 1,500 page book and decided to just split it into 3 because of the way that this series has been written and the way that it's been structured. It feels like all 3 books just kind of flow into one. So yeah, I'm hoping for a good ending. I feel like I said that in my last clip, but I am nervous about what's going to happen. I mean, I don't think I'm actually that nervous because I do trust that I'm going to like this ending. I've just got a feeling from the way that things have been building up. But I think even though I might not love certain things, I think I'm going to appreciate what's going to happen. I'm rambling now, you can tell that I'm exhausted, but yeah, I'm going to read some more of this now. Hopefully the next time I check in with you, I will have finished this series and I'll be able to wrap up my final thoughts. So it is finally time to wrap up this vlog. I've got the books in the wrong order, but I have officially finished the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. I finished reading Last Argument of Kings last night, and oh my goodness, this was a roller coaster. Like, the last 150 pages were so gripping and intense, and I really loved that, even though I didn't love the entire ending. I liked the tone. It was very frustrating though, which, let's be honest, fits the entire vibe of the series, because this was one big frustration. I was actually looking through some reviews for this last book, and it seems very divided. Like, people seem to either love this ending or hate it, and I did really like it. I am glad that there are still more books to come though, because I still have quite a few questions after finishing this, more to do with the world building, because the world building in this was quite ambiguous across the series. Like, apart from, I think in the second book, there was a little bit of like explanation around the history of this world, but otherwise you were kind of having to read between the lines. I think this is the kind of series that you read for the characters and because you want to find out what's going to happen to the characters. Like, the plot is there, but it's in the background, and it's very messy and wishy-washy, but there were still a few surprises, especially towards the end of this book. Like, I really liked the way that everything came together. I do think if you read the first book and you do not care either way about any of the characters, then you're probably not going to like this series as a whole, but I am excited to read more books in this series. I know that there's a few standalones next, and then there's another trilogy, I think, as well. I've not read a lot of grimdark fantasy, but what I am starting to learn is that I really like the atmosphere of grimdark, and how there's a lot of grey morality, but also sometimes the morality isn't even that grey. I can't decide who my favourite character was. It's between Glocta and Logan. I think I'm leaning more towards Glocta, because I thought the chronic pain rep was done really well, and I really liked the political side of the plot and his character arc in general. Logan though was still a really interesting character. I really liked the contrast between his internal monologue and the way that he sees himself and the way that other people see him, and how people treat him based on his reputation. I thought the whole thing was done in a really clever way. Ferro was my least favourite perspective to follow, and it's such a shame because I think there was a lot of potential with her character, but she didn't really have much personality outside of anger and revenge, and I found it quite repetitive and frustrating. Some of the other characters, like Dogman and, was his name Three Trees? That group of characters, I could not tell you anything about them individually. Like, to me, they all felt like the same person. And that's not to say that I didn't enjoy reading about them or following their perspectives, but I wanted more. On that note though, I think I am going to wrap up the vlog here. So thanks for watching if you made it this far. If you've read this series, then let me know in the comments what you thought of it. And yeah, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me. But otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye.